All right, welcome back to Applied Wisdom, Literature for Living Better. If you're into like personal growth and all that, you've probably run into this idea of breaking free from, well, limitations, right? And today we're diving into a book that's like a pure shot of that kind of thinking. Nassim Nicholas Taleb's The Bed of Procrustes.
This book, it's not your typical read. It's a collection of these really potent philosophical jabs. They're called aphorisms. Basically, Taleb took his big ideas, the ones about how we deal with uncertainty, especially the kind we can't predict.
The black swan stuff.
Exactly. And he kind of distilled those down into these super sharp observations about how we try to, I don't know, shoehorn reality into our own neat little mental boxes.
The title itself, The Bed of Procrustes, is so wild. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So for anyone who hasn't heard this myth, it's this old Greek story about an innkeeper, Procrustes, who had this bed. And get this, he was obsessed with making every guest fit it
Perfectly, no matter what.
too tall, chop their legs off, too short, stretch them out on a rack. Obviously, that's brutal, but Taleb uses it as this metaphor.
Right, to highlight this thing we all do, but in much subtler ways.
Exactly, this urge to oversimplify, to force the messy, complex world, and even ourselves, into these rigid categories. So today, our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to extract some wisdom from these thought-provoking jabs that Taleb throws at us. Make it practical, stuff you can actually use.
So let's get into what Taleb calls the Procrustes problem. That myth, it's messed up, but it really does reflect so much of what we see happening around us, right? This need to make things fit a certain mold, even when it's just not natural.
It's right
everywhere.
One of the big things Taleb points to is how we try to apply these perfect statistical models, like the ones economists love, to stuff that's fundamentally unpredictable. The markets, health, all that. We fall in love with our neat little models.
The map, yeah.
And forget about the actual messy, unpredictable territory. Those black swan events, the things nobody saw coming, always seem to blow up our perfect predictions.
Right, and it's fascinating how this tendency pops up in so many areas. It's not just economics. Think about how we label people. Introvert, extrovert, type A, type B. Suddenly we have all these expectations about how they should act, how they should think.
We're trying to flatten them out.
Totally. We miss all the nuance, the complexity of who they really are. It's a disservice to them, and frankly, it limits our own understanding.
It's so true. And then it shows up in our systems too, right? Education, work, even government. These rigid structures that don't account for the fact that, hey, people are different. Things don't always go according to plan.
No, they don't.
You build these elaborate Procrustean beds, and then we act all surprised when things break down, when people don't fit neatly inside.
And then this is another thing Taleb brings up. The elegant theories that, well, they sound great on paper, but they don't always hold up in the real world.
Right. We'd rather ignore the inconvenient facts that contradict our beautiful theory than actually question the theory itself.
We kind of get blinded by the neatness of it all.
We start to reshape how we see the world just to fit our tools and stories instead of the other way around. Kind of like that saying, if all you have is the hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the Procrustean version of that. If all you have is a rigid model, well, reality has to bend to it. That's the rule.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, isn't it? I mean, I know I've done it. So I guess the question for all of us listening is, have you ever felt that pressure that you have to fit into some mold that just doesn't feel right? At work, in a relationship, maybe even just in your own head with how you think about yourself. Recognizing those Procrustean beds that we're trying to squeeze into, that's the first step, right?
Yeah, it is. Becoming aware of it.
Okay, so we've talked about the problem, this whole Procrustes problem. Now, what about the solutions, or at least the ways to navigate this kind of world more effectively? One thing Taleb keeps hammering on is how skeptical he is about predicting the future.
Oh, he really goes after that.
He basically says it's a fool's game, especially in those areas that are most prone to randomness, those black swan events we talked about. So what's the practical takeaway for our listeners? Maybe it's about being a little more humble about our own predictions.
Acknowledging that there are just some things we can't foresee. I think that's a huge step.
It's not about saying the future's a complete mystery, but recognizing that there's a lot we just can't know. And maybe instead of trying to map out the exact path, our energy's better spent on being more adaptable, being ready to pivot.
Being agile.
Exactly. And that leads us to another really interesting idea from Taleb. He calls it via negativa, which basically means the power of subtraction.
Ah, yes. It's counterintuitive, but often more effective.
So instead of always trying to add more to our lives, more habits, more stuff, in the pursuit of self-improvement, maybe we should first focus on what we can remove, the things that are clearly holding us back.
Yeah, the stuff that's not serving us. Get rid of the bad before you start adding more good. It's like clearing the weeds before you plant new seeds.
So that could mean, I don't know, those habits that drain our energy, the situations that always seem to lead to bad outcomes, those relationships that just aren't working. It's about recognizing those things and having the courage to cut them out.
Sometimes avoiding a Procrustean bed is the bad move. Instead of trying to force yourself to fit into a situation that's just wrong for you, you remove yourself.
It's about creating space for something better.
Exactly.
So we're not just talking about decluttering your house here. This is about decluttering your life, your mind, your relationships.
It's really powerful when you think about it that way.
Another big theme in the Bed of Procrustes is this emphasis on practical wisdom. Taleb really values real-world experience, street smarts, if you will, over just having a bunch of theoretical knowledge. Think about the difference between, I don't know, reading a book about swimming.
And actually jumping in the pool.
Exactly. Which one gives you the real understanding?
The one where you get wet.
Where you might flail around a bit and figure it out. The messy stuff. It's that hands-on experience that really teaches us.
Right. You learn by doing, by making mistakes, by adjusting. It's not always elegant, but it's how we actually gain true knowledge.
So, practically speaking, this might mean prioritizing that hands-on experience. It's not enough to just read about something or listen to a podcast. We've got to get out there and try things.
Experiment, test, iterate.
See what works, what doesn't, and then adjust.
Okay, one last big idea from Taleb that I think is so relevant. He's really critical of what he calls empty suits.
Yes, the talkers, not the doers. The people who talk a big game, but they don't actually have any real understanding or accountability. He uses this phrase, skin in the game. The idea is that those making decisions should also bear the consequences of those decisions.
It's about having something to lose. It aligns your incentives, keeps you honest.
So how do we get better at spotting these empty suits? It's easy to be swayed by fancy credentials or impressive jargon.
Taleb suggests looking at their track record. What have they actually achieved? What are their real-world results?
Not just what they say they can do. It's about looking past the hype.
And asking, do they have skin in the game? Are they personally affected by the outcomes of their advice or decisions? If not, maybe take what they say with a grain of salt.
So much good stuff to think about. And I think this all ties back to this core idea of the Bed of Procrustes. It's about recognizing those rigid frameworks we sometimes impose on ourselves and the world. And just maybe finding ways to loosen them up a bit, embrace the messiness, the uncertainty.
Allow for that.
So to wrap this up, if you're listening to this, I encourage you to really think about, is there an area of your life where you're trying too hard to impose order, to simplify things? Could you maybe benefit from stepping back and embracing a little more uncertainty?
And how about this? If you're facing a challenge right now, try the via negativa approach. Instead of immediately looking for a complex solution, is there something you could remove? Something you could eliminate that might actually make the biggest difference? Sometimes subtraction is the best addition.
Taleb's The Bed of Procrustes is this really powerful reminder to be wary of one-size-fits-all thinking. To respect the complexity of the world and ourselves is about being a little more humble, a little more adaptable, and really valuing that practical, real-world wisdom. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope these ideas have given you something to chew on, something to apply in your own life.
Something to break free from.
Exactly. And hey, stay tuned for the next episode of Applied Wisdom, Literature for Living Better. You can subscribe if this helped you. It really helps the channel.